that you sent, and we were able to put them in a few categories. My name is Ludmila, or Mila for short, and this is Dennis with me, and we're going to be asking the questions. Dr. Hovind will be doing the answering part of it, so we get to do the easy part. He does the difficult part of it. Right. We have around 44 questions, so we'll try to get through as many as we can. Question number 1 says this: what was the source of light and heat before God created the sun?
If you read Genesis chapter 1, God made this, it says, God said, let there be light. And then later, God made the sun, moon, and stars. I think he himself is light. God is light. In him is no darkness, nor shadow of turning. And so I think God made the sun and stars later on purpose so we would know not to worship them. We should worship him. He is the light of the world. There were no trees or plants to need sunlight anyway until day 4, so it wouldn't matter. But God himself would have to be the source of the light, I believe.
Thank you.
All right, and then for the second question we have, why did God create the stars, and why is it that we can only see a fraction of them here from Earth?
All right, brother, those are all hyperlinks. If you just take the mouse and push on the word stars, it'll take me right to the right slide up there, the 4th one down there. Okay. The star, there's no question there's a whole lot of stars out there in the solar system. We don't even know how many we can see. We're not even sure that we see how would you know when you've seen the last one? Maybe there's one behind it, you know. So current estimate is there are 70 sextillion stars that are visible from Earth with the biggest telescopes we have. If stars were forming, there would be about 6,655,000 forming every minute for 20 billion years, yet nobody's ever seen a single star form. They don't even know how they could form. Nobody has a clue on that. So why God made the stars, so many of them, I think it's just for the oh wow factor, so we'll say, man, what a mighty God we serve. Maybe it's for future, for when we get to heaven. He's got plans for us to go visit and tour these things. I don't know. But it is pretty cool just to lay out on your back and look at them, you know, on a dark night. The Bible says he counts the number of the stars. Now, this is a very interesting verse. That does not mean he knows how many there are, though I'm sure he does. Each star has its own number. He knows the number of each star. That is star number 4729635874772. He knows the number. The Bible doesn't say he knows how many hairs are on your head. He knows the number of the hairs on your head. Each hair has a number. Some of you would be very easy to count how many, 5. But he knows the number of each hair. So I think the stars were made for us to say, wow, what a mighty God we serve. And Satan is using them to draw people away from God. And it could be because Psalm 148 says, ye praise him, ye waters that be above the heavens. The only verse on the topic that I know of, Psalm 148. There may still be a canopy of water or ice beyond the stars. We don't know how far they go, but if they do stop, then the obvious next question is, okay, what's on the other side? It could be that everything we see and marvel at as this huge universe is in one of those glass balls on God's dresser that he picks up and shakes once in a while, you know. So I don't know. Okay, next question.
Thank you. Where in the Bible does it talk about other planets?
There's no place in the Bible where it mentions other planets. It just talks about heavenly bodies, you know, sun, moon, and stars. So if you count Pluto, and they argue about that one, we know that there are 9 planets around our solar system. There is no evidence of any planets around any other solar systems, any other stars. There could be some, I don't know, but there's no hard evidence of that. What they do is they look at a star, and they see the star wobble a little bit. And they assume a planet is going around, and it's tugging the star, called gravitational tug, so it's pulling the star back and forth. One guy spent hours and years cataloging all the stars that wobble, saying, oh, that one's got planets going around it, and oh, that one's got planets going around it. After years of writing down all the stars that have planets going around, they discovered the base of his telescope was loose. It was his telescope wobbling, not the star. So I'm a little, there's no hard evidence of any stars having planets around them. Now, I will say this, even if there were, that would not be evidence of life on other planets. We can see 8 other planets from here. We know there's no life on those. And the Bible says Eve is the mother of all living. So I would have a real hard time believing there's any stars, any planets, period, around other stars, or certainly any with life around them. So I got off topic here. The Bible does not talk about any other planets, though. I think the planets do all kinds of things for the Earth. Number one, they kind of run interference for us. Asteroids and meteors coming through space are much more likely to hit the bigger planets like Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. They're kind of going around sweeping up the solar system before they hit us, so they're good protection for us, if nothing else. There may be lots more reasons for them too. Okay?
We actually had one question that's asking, what is circular reasoning?
Circular reasoning is reasoning in a circle. Why? How do you know the age of the layers? By the fossils. How do you know the age of the fossils? By the layers. But how do you know the age of the layers? By the fossils. It's circular reasoning. It's absolutely stupid. But evolutionary theory is full of that.
Thank you. What is a paleontologist and what do they study?
Paleo means old or ancient. And ology means study of. Paleontologist is a person who studies ancient things, paleo things. They would study ancient civilizations. Probably paleontology would be different than archaeology or zoology or biology or all the ology. There's 100 of ologies out there. So a paleontologist would study ancient civilizations to try to learn about them. You can dig up an old city and learn, how they cooked their food, what kind of houses they lived. Sometimes you can't learn much about them, but so a paleontologist is a study of ancient things, but the further back you go, the more guesswork it involves. It becomes real shaky ground after a while. Hit the first button, just number 1, and then home. There you go. Okay.
All right, and the next question is, what are trilobites?
Trilobites, those creatures I showed you before. Tri means 3, lobes means section. They have 3 lobes. Their body's divided into 3 sections. Like a little roly-poly, you find them in the woods all the time. Trilobe means have 3 lobes on 3 parts to their body. It's just parts to their shell. That's all it means. A trilobe bite. And they come huge and little bitty.
Thank you. What is a geologic column and how thick is it?
The geologic column is a pure fiction that we talked about in the last session about the layers of rock, and they give them all names. It varies in thickness all over the world. Some places there's none on the surface. It's all been washed away. You have, what's called the basement rock or the basalt right at the surface. The geologic column is actually the evidence for Noah's flood. A flood would automatically cover the earth with thousands of layers of mud. And in some places, as the mountains lifted up and the valleys sank down, they'd be completely washed away back down to the bare original rock. So I think 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by what's called sedimentary rock that settled out from a flood. Sedimentary, all the geologic column would be sedimentary rock. And it doesn't exist any place in the world in its entirety. If it did, it would have to be 1,000 feet thick. There are places where the mud layers, like Grand Canyon, are several thousand feet thick, but it still could have all formed in one big flood in the days of Noah. Parts of the earth has none of it, showing. Other parts have lots of it showing. Okay.
Right. It's possible you might have covered some of these already, but are there any living dinosaurs today?
Can you shut that down and go to 3B? I have over 7,000 slides in PowerPoint. It helps if you ask the questions in the same order that I have the answers. But if you'll watch my seminar series, sound booth. Hey, there, shut that down. 3B, okay, good. Living dinosaurs. I cover for probably an hour all the stuff I gathered over the years of dinosaurs that might still be alive. This is not forwarding here. There we go, okay. My daughter's wedding. No, there we go. Okay. There's lots of evidence that man has lived with dinosaurs, like they carved their images on the Ica stones. Textbooks all say they lived millions of years ago, which is just pure baloney. They've always lived with man. But as far as living dinosaurs, this guy in National Geographic says, no human being has ever seen a live dinosaur. There's no way he can know something like that. He'd have to talk to everybody that ever lived. We talk about how dinosaurs are simply reptiles that never stop growing. Noah took them on the ark. But dinosaurs still living, This is a Roman mosaic from the 2nd century after Christ, made out of small tiles on a shower floor. Why would they put long-necked dinosaurs on their ceramic tile? There is just a mountain of evidence that man has lived with dinosaurs. In the swamp in Africa, right there, they're called the Lakwala Swamp. It's 55,000 square miles, which means it's huge. That's bigger than Arkansas, bigger than any one of those yellow states, same size as the red states. In the Congo, there have been reports regularly of dinosaurs still living. This is from 1948, Saturday Evening Post, where they saw a dinosaur still alive. Many people have come back from hunting game over there and say, man, there are dinosaurs alive in the swamp. Giant crocodiles have been found in there. There's a 24-footer caught in the Congo back in '05. That's a big crocodile. There's one with a deer in its mouth. I don't know if you can see, the picture's not very good, but there's the crocodile here carrying a deer. I think there's another picture of it. Let me see. Yeah, there it is. So, see, crocodiles and alligators and reptiles in general never stop growing. They never stop. Once you get to a certain size, you no longer have any enemies. It's all downhill from there. But this book, The Living Dinosaur by Roy Mackal, the natives in the swamp called it Mokele Mbembe. That was their name for it. They said, oh yeah, they're active at night. They're very rarely seen. He found footprints of it. Missionary friend of mine, Eugene Thomas, he died years ago, but he was there 43 years as a missionary. He said, oh yeah, my pygmies killed one and ate it. There are reports in that swamp, and I go for an hour on my video number 3, all the evidence I've been able to gather about dinosaurs that might still be alive. I don't think there's lots of them, and you need to be careful when you go to the mall. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there are reports all over the world, like Loch Ness Monster, Lake Champlain Monster. William Gibbons and I wrote this book together, first book I ever wrote about dinosaurs still living. We did that probably for junior high age kids. But there's a lot of stuff on my video number 3. There's some of the expeditions to the Congo where I think all of them have come back reporting, yep, there's dinosaurs in that swamp, still alive. Let's see. In Brazil, 1907, Colonel Fawcett reported seeing a dinosaur right there in the Amazon jungle. He said that's what it looked like. They found the footprints of it. But all through history, they've been reported. Let me get a couple of the more modern ones here. Big snakes. Loch Ness. Loch simply means lake in Scottish language. Loch Ness is Lake Ness. It's 24 miles long, mile to a mile and a half wide, and 900 feet deep. Loch Ness is big enough that everybody in the world could go drowned in it at the same time. It'll hold 7.5 billion people if you wanted to drown everybody. But there have been many reports in Loch Ness of sightings of this creature that they claim is the Loch Ness Monster, okay? Most of them claim it's a plesiosaur, this guy right there. So that is, this evolutionist wrote, there's one thing wrong with this theory. Plesiosaurs became extinct 70 million years ago. No, there's nothing wrong with the theory of a dinosaur still being alive. There's something wrong with the idea they lived 70 million years ago. That's what's wrong. But if you watch my video number 3, I cover probably 100 sightings in the last 50 years of what appear to be dinosaurs still alive. Okay? Hit the home page there, brother. Go ahead.
Thank you. Aside from the obvious answer of Darwin, where does the idea of evolution come from? Is there anything that goes back further?
If you go to part 4A, I think it's 4A, and then there'll be the word evolution. If you kids go to public school or public college, or you're going to get into an email debate or a debate online about evolution, I've learned how to win the debate in the first 5 minutes. Okay, it's so simple. You have to define exactly what you're talking about. This is all you need to do, and the debate's over. You win. If someone says, do you believe in evolution? I say, what do you mean? Can you get 4A up there? Coming? Okay. No 4A? Okay. That's 3A. 4A. That's still part 3 up there. As soon as you say, what do you mean by the word evolution, and you define the word, the argument is over. Let's see, that's 7. That's still 7. Shut that down.
As they're looking for 4A, could you answer, you started speaking on it. There's a question later on that asks how many debates you've participated in and if you've won every single one.
As far as formal debates at a university, about 100. As far as debates, including those I've done online, 120 maybe. Yeah, in the university setting where I go and I have a formal debate, close to 100. I think everybody that watches them says I won every one. It's not that I'm smarter, it's that I'm right and they're wrong. Okay, let's see, variations. Click on just the word Darwin. Okay, let me see if this is it here. I give the 6 different meanings of the word evolution. Variations within the kind. Okay. Here we go. The word evolution, if you're going to get into a debate, be sure you define what you're talking about. Here's the problem. If you don't do what I'm about to tell you, you will lose the debate. If you do what I'm about to tell you, you will win the debate. It's so simple. The first meaning of the word evolution would be cosmic evolution. That is the origin of time, space, matter. Where did time, space, and matter come from? Secondly, you have what's called chemical evolution. If the Big Bang Theory were true, and it's not, but if it was, the Big Bang would produce hydrogen. Now you've got to get from hydrogen to all these other elements. How on earth do you get 92 elements out of hydrogen? Can you make gold and silver and platinum out of hydrogen gas? If so, I'd like to see how that's done. I could get rich. Thirdly, you have to have what's called stellar evolution. The stars have to evolve. No one's ever seen a star form. All we do is see stars blow up once in a while, called a nova or a supernova. Number 4, let's see, you have to have what's called organic evolution. This is the origin of life. How did life get started from non-living material? They don't want to talk about any of these first 4. So when they say the word evolution, they're deceiving you. Number 5, you have what's called macroevolution, where an animal changes into a different kind, and I use the word kind, of animal. Number 6, you have what's called microevolution. Now this one happens. Variations within the same kind. There are 5 different varieties of giraffes in the world. You wouldn't realize that till you stand them side by side and look and say, wow, they've got a different spot pattern. Okay, there are 5 different giraffes. They probably had a common ancestor. It was called a giraffe. There are 8 kinds of bears in the world, and they might have had a common ancestor called a bear. So what they're going to do, they're going to fool you by the definition of the word. The first 5 meanings are purely religious. Nobody's ever seen any of those happen. None. Number 6, we see that all the time. So when you're talking to an atheist or an evolutionist and you say the word evolution, he is thinking of number 6. And there are millions of good examples of it happening. And he does not understand how you can't see it. But you are thinking of number 5 or 4 or 3 or 2, and you don't understand how he does see it. So define the word. Which one are we talking about? Evolution. This guy says it's a change over time. First definition. That's not really what they mean. Then they say living things have changed over time. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're going to skip down to living things? You're going to skip over the first 4 meanings of evolution? Cosmic, chemical, stellar? They'd like to skip over that. Okay? They don't want to talk about those because they don't have any answer for them. Students are given the definition of the word, but it's only microevolution, like this textbook. Evolution is a change in species over time. I believe in that. Change in species. See, the Bible doesn't mention the word species. The Bible says they bring forth after their kind. This is all on video number 4, lies in the textbooks. Let's see. Variations happen, but they have limits. Farmers have been trying to get bigger pigs for a long time. They crossbreed their pigs, trying to get the biggest pigs they can. Okay? Do you think they'll ever get a pig as big as Texas? No, there's a limit in there someplace. Roaches become resistant to pesticides after a while, but they're still a roach, and they will never become resistant to a sledgehammer. There's a limit to the resistance, okay? These are 3 tiger cubs from the same mother, and they probably had a common ancestor, a tiger. Still the same kind. Video 4, I cover that. The dogs, for instance, we go from a Great Dane to a Chihuahua. They're still a dog. Still the dog kind. And Chihuahuas cannot produce Great Danes, and he's probably thinking, let's see, how long would the Chihuahuas last in the real world? Yeah, right. Go ahead, make my day. Here goes. There are who knows how many kinds of corn. Gee whiz, hundreds of varieties of corn. I grew up in Illinois, corn country. They got them all numbered. Here's corn XL7252. Don't mix it up with 9562. Something will blow up, you know. But there's 400 varieties of dogs in the world, and they probably had a common ancestor, a dog. So what they're going to do, they're going to fool you with the meaning of the word evolution. Like this textbook shows the kids a dog, the different kinds of dogs coming from a wolf. And they'll say that's divergent evolution. Oh, come on, don't give it a fancy name. It's still in the dog kind. 10 times in Genesis 1, and 10 more times in the flood story, Genesis 6 and 7, it talks about the animals bringing forth after their kind. Don't get trapped into that species argument. On the opposite sides of Grand Canyon, there are 2 different varieties of squirrel. The Kaibab squirrel and the, what's the other one? A Burt squirrel. They might have had a common ancestor, a squirrel. That's not evolution. That's variations within the same kind. That's all it is, okay?
So Darwin, did he have any influence before him?
I didn't hear you. What?
Darwin, was it completely his idea of evolution, or was he influenced?
Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, really kind of started the evolution idea. It's been around for centuries. It came really from the Greeks back before Christ, you know, the idea that variations happen. Yeah. But then you got to ask yourself, do these variations have any kind of limit? The Christian says, well, yeah, they've got a limit. They're the same kind. The horse and the zebra might have had a common ancestor. I don't know. But it looked like a horse, you know, 4-wheel drive, leather upholstery. I mean, it's horse, you know. That wouldn't prove that horse and banana are related. So Darwin really kind of took the idea at a time in history when people were hoping to get rid of God, telling them what to do. It's not advancing here, fellas. I can't get it. There we go. We had one of the world's smallest horses come visit our dinosaur Adventureland, 17 inches tall. My granddaughter, she's firstborn, trying to ride the thing. Yeah, horses have limit. There's variations, but they're limited. I think there are, well, you can crossbreed a horse and a zebra, and you get a zorse. If it's a zebra with a mare, it's called a zonkey. Pony and zebra is called a zeoni. You can get a zedonk, a zebras, a shebra. Okay, it still looks like a horse. I mean, that's the whole point, is they're going to confuse you with the arguments. And Darwin noticed these varieties and said, I think it goes infinitely forever, that the horse and the banana are related. And that's where he went stark raving stupid, in my humble, totally unbiased opinion.
Thank you.
Okay?
All right, and then we have a question that says, does radiometric dating work at all? And if it does, is it only accurate for a few thousand years?
Radioactive dating was started after World War II, when we dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and realized, whoa, we just created some radioactive elements here. Radiation, okay? So they started in 1947, right after World War II. If you click the one that says carbon dating, I think, there it is, first column, okay. This guy said radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. Back in 1830, they made up the idea of the layers of the Earth being different ages, and then the dates became established in people's minds, and 100 years later, they invent the radioactive dating. So radioactive dating is not used to date fossils. It's geologic column that's still used to date fossils. This guy says, I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. They date fossils by the geologic column. So don't let them tell you, we know that bone is 80 million years old because of carbon dating. Here's the way it works. Let's take a minute on this answer. But the Earth's atmosphere today is about 100 miles thick, okay? And it contains mostly nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.06% carbon dioxide, and 0.0000765% radioactive carbon-14. The carbon-14 that mixes with oxygen and becomes carbon dioxide, and the plants breathe in carbon dioxide. The sunlight produces radioactive carbon-14 by cosmic rays bombarding the atmosphere, and they combine with nitrogen. They knock a few things off the nitrogen and turn it into carbon-14. Who cares? Anyway, about 21 pounds of new carbon-14 is being produced every year in the whole world. 21 pounds divided over the whole world, so not much. Carbon and nitrogen are right next to each other on the periodic table, and so when the nitrogen gets bombarded into carbon, it becomes what they call radioactive. It does not want to be carbon-14. It wants to change back. So I cover on video 7 a 20-minute answer to your question. Carbon dating does not ever work, I don't think. I'll give you a few examples here. How it's supposed to work and the problems with it. Let's see. Radiocarbon is still forming faster than it's decaying, which means you'd have to know when the animal lived so that you could determine when it lived. Which you would. I mean, it is circular reasoning. I give some examples of how the problem is. The lower leg of a mammoth was 15,000 years old, but the skin was 21,000. That's back in 1949 when they first invented it, so maybe it didn't work very good. Let's go up a little earlier here. 1963, living mollusk shells were carbon dated at 2,300 years old. They're still alive. How can you say they're 2,300 years old? Well, let's get better. 1970, they said if carbon date supports our theories, we put it in the main text. If it doesn't entirely contradict them, we put it in a footnote. If it's completely out of date, we drop it. Living, freshly killed seal, carbon dated at 1,300 years old. They just killed it. So I go through on my video number 7 some of the problems. Here's living snails, carbon date 27,000 years old. They're still alive. So I don't know anybody who trusts carbon dating, that understands how it works, and would say it's anything reasonable. Watch my video 7 for a whole lot more on that one, okay?
Let's talk specifically about water flood and post-flood questions.
I cannot understand what you're saying.
Let's talk about water flood and post-flood questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, were sedimentary rocks created during the flood or in creation?
I think the Bible says when God first created the world, it was underwater. And then he said, let the dry land appear in day 3. So there may have been some sedimentation, just normal part of the creation. So I don't know that this is true, but I suspect some sedimentary rock is from the creation, the way it was created, with the earth being underwater and then the dry land appearing. That, I would think, would cause some washing away. But I think most of what we see that's called sedimentary rock was formed during the flood in the days of Noah. Okay?
All right, and then we have when it says, when we read Genesis chapter 1, we read that God separated the water from the firmament. And so the question is, what is that firmament?
Well, I covered that in the last session here. The firmament is almost certainly where the birds fly. That's the atmosphere. And he said there was water above the firmament. So that I take to be the canopy of crystalline water, probably ice. See, super cold ice is magnetic. It could be 10 miles up, and if you go up right now 10 miles over your head, it's 90 below zero right now, just 10 miles up. You get in the airplane, somebody flown across the ocean, and they got the little TV screen in front of you, you know, it tells you outside temperature. You know, you get 100 below zero at 39,000 feet, which is only 7 miles. So extremely cold, just 10 miles. Oh, you know, over the Sahara Desert, it's 10 miles. But so I think the whole Earth was surrounded by a crystalline canopy of ice, increased air pressure, filtered out sunlight, and it wouldn't melt. Because an Eskimo can build a house out of snow, go inside and build a fire, and it won't melt his roof. Because the outside is so cold, it keeps drawing the heat away before it can reach the melting point. So it's called the igloo effect. Who cares? But I think the original creation was that way. The sun would shine through the canopy, heat up the earth, and any extra heat would be dissipated back through the canopy. Not a problem. It wouldn't melt it. So did I go off track on your question? I don't see where that was on here, but... Okay, so the firmament, in question number 4, it would be the atmosphere. It says so where the birds fly. Okay.
Number 6. Since there was water under the crust, was that why water had come out of the rock when Moses hit his staff?
When Moses hit the rock with his staff and brought the water out, well, you can drill pretty near anywhere in the world and get a well. I mean, you can drill right here and find water if you go down far enough, I'm sure. So there's still a lot of water, but that's mostly groundwater in the space between the rock and sand, as opposed to real big pockets of water that are trapped. Though there are some huge pockets of water trapped in the crust. There are a lot of underground pools of water, huge ones. How Moses got it from there, I don't know. Bible says first time God said, smite the rock, and water came out. Later, God said, speak to the rock. But Moses hit it instead, and water came out, but Moses did not get to go into the promised land because of that mistake. See, Jesus is that rock is Jesus, a symbol, and he only needs to be smitten once on the cross. He won't be smitten again. Okay?
All right, and the next question, it says, how did animals cross the ocean after the flood? And then it revolves around the explanation of the theory of Pangea.
Right, Pangea, I think, is on here. Pangea, is it number 2, second page? How did the animals get to Australia, I think is the way I phrased it on here. Maybe it's here. And not on that one. Tell you what, go to, shut this one down and go to part 6, seminar 6. It's interesting, if you look at the shapes of the continents, I think it is part 6. Pangea, kangaroos in Australia, bottom right, click on that one. How did the kangaroos get to Australia? Let's see. On my seminar 6, I covered this for a long time, but if you lowered the oceans just a few hundred feet, you notice England and Ireland, they're islands today, but the water between England and France is only 150 feet deep. That's the deepest part of the English Channel, from here to the back door. That's it. So it's 30 miles wide, but only 150 feet deep. So if you lowered the oceans 150 feet, Norway, Norway, Denmark, all of this would be the beach way out here. England and Ireland would not be islands. You can see it from a satellite view. I mean, look, that's pretty shallow. From the satellite, they can see down to the bottom of the ocean along here. So all of this is relatively shallow ground. It's called what's called the continental shelf, okay? If you lowered the oceans just 60 feet, and they average 12,000 feet deep. So out of 12,000 feet of water, take out 60. Near nothing. Russia and Alaska are connected because all this water in here is only 60 feet deep, roughly. If you lowered the oceans 100 feet, the land bridge between Alaska and Russia would be 10,000 miles wide. If you raise the oceans just 10%, this is what it would look like. Everything just with a 10% deeper ocean, we wouldn't have anything in eastern America. It'd only be the Appalachian Mountains. If you lowered the oceans just a few hundred feet, Florida would be connected to Cuba, and the Gulf of Mexico would be real tiny. So all around the continents, you have what's called a continental shelf. Okay. Mobile, Pensacola Bay, 7 feet deep, which is almost nothing, you know. If you lowered the oceans a little bit, you could walk from Vietnam to Australia. I think right after the flood, the ice caps were much larger coming down to Kansas City, Missouri, and it would trap all that extra water in the form of ice, and if you have larger ice caps, you have smaller oceans because the water's trapped in the form of ice. That would take a few hundred years to melt. As it melted back to where it is today, as the ice, nobody questions there was an ice age. But when does it fit? Well, in the Bible, I think it comes during and right after the flood. So for the first few hundred years, they could actually walk any place in the world. It was all connected. Kangaroos, and they ended up in Australia because they're less aggressive, and so rather than fight for their territory for the tiger, they move and give it up to the tiger. And so they ended up protected. As the migration wave took off from Mount Ararat, they would be pushed away over a few hundred years, generation after generation. They ended up stuck in Australia, and the rising water protected them, isolated them. So a continental shelf is the shallow part around all the continents. Let's see. So the question was about kangaroos? Oh, animals. As far as Pangea, I'll tell you what, hit number 1, guys, back to the home slide. Just 1 and enter should do it. Pangea, the fourth one down on the left, okay? Here's some things they don't tell you about Pangea that I think they should. They'll say all the continents used to fit together. This is typical textbook propaganda. South America and Africa seem to be a perfect fit. Oh yeah? What they don't tell you was the shapes, they will tell you the shapes seem to fit, and there are similar fossils found on opposite sides. Okay, I agree. Well, those same similar fossils are found all over the world. Not just on opposite sides, they're found everywhere. Secondly, they don't tell you Africa was shrunk 35 to 40% to make them fit. Mexico and Central America are gone. Donde está Mexico? Panama, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras. They took them out. Africa is 11.6 million square miles. South America is 6.9 million. Don't they look about the same size on that drawing? They shrank Africa 40% to make it look like they'll fit. They twisted one way and 2 the other way. And they don't tell you what I think ought to be obvious to a kindergartner. If you take the water out of the oceans, there is dirt underneath. People say, Hovind, do you think the continents were ever connected? I say, what do you mean? They're still connected right now. Aren't they? It's just the low places are full of water, that's all. What do you mean, were they connected? Hello, they're still connected. You guys are connected to China right now. Only there's a big ocean in between. But there's dirt under that water, like, duh. How can they be that dumb? I think you'd have to have help to be that dumb. You couldn't possibly do it on your own. You had to go to school for years. Okay, so I cover Pangea on video number 6. I knew it was in there somewhere. Go ahead.
What made living things, plants, animals, humans, bigger and live longer before the flood?
I think humans, plants, animals, everything was probably much bigger before the flood. So much so, that oftentimes if you find bones in the dirt, they would not even be recognized for what they are because it's already in these guys' heads. Man started off like a chimpanzee, and we're getting bigger, better, stronger, smarter. So if you found the bones of an 18-foot human, they would never dream it's a human. They would give it something else, like a giant sloth or something. It couldn't be a human because of their theory. So I think that what I covered on video number 2, or DVD number 2, I still call them videos. I was locked up for 9 years. I can't believe all the technology changes. And they brought the outhouse into the building, put the flush thing on there. I like that. No more corn cob. That's good. Anyway, I like all those changes. But the DVD number 2 talks about the original creation. What was it like? I think most things were much larger. Fossil grasshoppers have been found 2 feet long. Fossils of grasshoppers. How do you explain that? Especially when you see an animal that breathes through its skin like a grasshopper or any insects. All insects breathe through their skin. They have a real problem. As they get larger, their surface area to volume ratio drops off. And we covered that on video number 2. There's a limit on how big insects can get where they simply can't get enough air anymore. They don't have enough skin to support their body mass. Watch DVD number 2 for more on that, okay?
All right, and then we have this one question. It's question number 9 on the paper. It's kind of phrased a little strange, but what do you think about those skulls, those fossils that were found? They give them names like Ardipithecus and all these kind of the really big skulls and whatnot.
They find what they call the cavemen, the so-called cavemen. On 2B, I cover that. DVD number 2, part B, the second half. What about the cavemen? Let's click on that first one there, okay? We teach the kids, this is Grandpa. So what about the cavemen? Can an ape-like creature turn to a human? Well, it's obviously Bill Clinton's an example, but many people in the Bible lived in caves, so you have to define what do you mean by caveman, okay? He was the world's most wanted caveman for a while. Lived in a cave. By the way, they figured out how to tell when the terrorists reach puberty. They put their diaper on their head. It was one of the world's most famous cavemen. So Nebraska man was used as evidence for evolution for a long time. All they really found for Nebraska man was one tooth. One tooth. There is Nebraska man. They built the entire creature from one tooth. Later, they found out the tooth actually came from a pig. All of it built up from, and his wife. They made his wife out of one tooth. They knew what he looked like and his wife. These guys are really good. I mean, how do you tell what his wife looks like from his tooth? Gee whiz. Anyway, there's the real Nebraska man right there. But Piltdown man was one found in Piltdown, England, which is how it got its name. In 1912, there was a big article in the New York Times, Darwin's theory proved true. Because of the Piltdown man, it was used as evidence in the Scopes monkey trial, 1925. It was later proven to be fraudulent. Piltdown man was a hoax. Someone took a jawbone, dyed it to make it look old, and filed the teeth down to make it look half human, half ape. It was a complete fraud. Neanderthal man is, I think, still used in textbooks many times. Joachim Neander lived in Germany. He wrote the song, Praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of Creation. He walked in this valley in the 1700s, and when he died, they named the valley after him, Neander Valley. Who cares? Well, later, while they're digging away limestone to use for some buildings in Germany someplace, they're quarrying the limestone, they found a skeleton of a man in the rock, solid rock. The guy had petrified, turned to stone, probably from the flood. The guy was 5'7", I think, and his back was bent over. And they said, oh, this is an old man who had arthritis. Now, he was found in 1856. The bones were found. It was classified as 100% human. Today, there are 300 Neanderthals that have been found in that region, France, Germany, Italy, etc. Okay? But when they couldn't find any evidence for evolution, they reclassified Neanderthal as a missing link. They said, his back is bent over. Monkeys walk on 4 legs, man walks on 2, and they said, he's slowly coming up. No, he's got arthritis. He's slowly going down. Okay? Not coming up. But they find these Neanderthals all over the place, and about 300 of them have been found. They find them buried with beads and flowers and arrowheads. I mean, these were normal humans. Can you name any animal that buries its dead? Or that buries them with any artifacts? Can you name any animal that does that? No. They said it had a sloped forehead, bigger eyebrow ridges, longer occipital bun. The back of the head is called your occipital bun. Who cares? Well, yeah, that's proof of evolution? Because it's got a sloped forehead? I don't think so. Let's see. Before the flood, the people lived to be 900. After the flood, they lived to be 400. Okay? When you chew on food, the masseter muscle pulls on your cheekbone and your jawbone, but also transfers some of the pulling through the temporalis muscle and the frontalis muscle to the eyebrow ridge. Your eyebrow ridge is a connection point for some of your facial muscles. Who cares? Well, it is important because the more you use a muscle pulling on the bone, the bigger the bone grows in response. A weightlifter will not only get bigger muscles, he will slowly get bigger bones, denser bone structure. Okay. Well, if a person is living to be 400 years old, just chewing his food is going to make a larger eyebrow ridge. Larger brow ridge is found in any culture that has a tougher, coarser diet. They always get a bigger brow ridge just because of chewing. That's an Aboriginal skull. This guy said, yeah, he said, Brother Hovind, I'm a Neanderthal. See, look at me. Got hair and everything. Okay. But he loves my videotapes, loves dinosaurs. Okay. Plus the back of the head, every time you bend down and lift your head up, the muscles on the back of your neck and shoulders have to pull your head back up. That's gradually going to elongate your skull. And of course, you're going to get a larger occipital bun just by fact of living to be 200 or 300 years old. So all of the so-called cavemen are covered in this, well, some of them in this book, Buried Alive, which is excellent. They call him the missing link. He's still alive. He's not missing. But I cover all this in video number 2 about all the so-called cavemen. They've either been hoaxes, frauds, misidentified, fully human, or fully ape. Okay?
Thank you very much. We're going to take a break and restart at 2:10. So you have about 6 minutes or so. At 2:10, we're going to ask the next question. So go ahead and stand up. You have about 6 minutes or so. We're going to restart in 6 minutes. We left the climate change one for later.